Welcome to the Stephen Fleet Podcast. Here I talk about anything under the sun, from the inconsequential to the deep and existential, to the fun and frivolous, to the wide and societally minded. As always, this podcast does not represent any official, medical, or educational advice. I may have opinions, but they should never be taken as personal guidance. Please seek the proper resources for your important life decisions. And now, off we go. Tears of the Kingdom has great atmosphere and truly impressive game mechanics. However, it suffers from a reused world and lackluster writing. I may expound on why I hold that opinion in future. I could just go ahead and list off what I don't like, but I think there's a more interesting perspective to take, which is, perhaps its shortcomings result from expectations the developers had when starting game development. The game began as DLC, at least in the first brainstormings of what the game would become. They soon found they had too many ideas, as well as ideas that needed a new game to actually implement. At this point, they didn't break away from Breath of the Wild completely. They still wanted to revisit the same Hyrule. Much would be the same, including the world, art style, and core game engine. Because of this pre-existing foundation, maybe they expected to develop and release the game fairly quickly. After all, they announced it relatively early. Might they have seen it as being possible in even 3 years' time? I wonder. A quick release would change the player expectations a bit too. The carryover design from Breath of the Wild would not seem so repetitive, and it probably wasn't envisioned to be a $70 game back then. A small amount of Sky Island territory, the emptiness of the depths, the simplicity of the story, the lack of new regions, the structural imitations of its predecessor. All these things kind of make sense if Tears of the Kingdom would have been released more quickly. The game might have felt like a fitting continuation. It could have been Breath of the Wild 2.0, but in a perfectly acceptable way. I have no doubts that they worked hard on it and released it when it was ready. My observation here is about expectations. When game designers conceive of something as DLC, as a continuation, and maybe, possibly, with a quick turnaround too, then certain game design decisions get made. Also, when the audience comes in with certain expectations, for instance a game being a standalone sequel, then old ideas/content can seem underwhelming where otherwise it might not. Let's go through some specifics here. Firstly, the world map. This is the most obvious carryover. For some of those who played Breath of the Wild and loved it, playing the same map is one of the most troublesome features of the sequel. Much of the appeal with the first game came from exploring a completely unknown horizon. But that's not the only issue here. Much of Tears' game mechanics would have been far better implemented if its world had been designed specifically for it. Maybe they could have made a whole new map with the design tools they developed for Breath of the Wild. Maybe they could have just added a few regions. The thing is, this is something that needed to happen from the start of development. 5 years might be enough time to develop a new map or new regions, but not if you don't envision that from the get-go. I don't think that was ever going to happen based on where they started from. And so Tears of the Kingdom sits in a space that feels a bit too developed for reusing a previous map, but unwilling to really strike out on its own. This confusion between new and old was something that the team did in fact deal with. It's not just in my imagination. I'll link a short article about their déjà vu in the description. Now, there aren't new regions, but there are new areas, the depths and the skies. Unfortunately, both seem underdeveloped. The skies promise big things with the size and diversity of the Sky Island, yet never live up to that promise. There aren't different biomes nor sizable and unique landmasses defined. The sky is full of the same island templates. The exceptions are a few lead-ups to dungeons and the labyrinths. But the lead-ups are not landmasses. They are part of the linear dungeon experience, more of an old-fashioned platforming challenge. It doesn't really contribute to the exploration aspect. And the labyrinths don't feel noteworthy at all to me. The through line here is the idea of challenges. The lands of the sky are filled with challenges alone. That's what they have to offer. They're not there for exploration. The spirit of exploration necessitates moments of open uncertainty about where to go. In the sky, you more or less know where you're trying to go. You just have to decide how to get there. I think this kind of works for a DLC conceived sequel, yet it doesn't really work for a bigger game, especially one with a longer development time. The longer it takes, the higher the public's anticipation. However, the expectations of the team themselves come into play as well. Maybe they conceived of the sky as extra content full of challenges, so by the game's finish, they simply succeeded in what they attempted to do. Reconsidering this design and expanding the Sky Islands is, again, something you need to get started on early in development. The structure of gameplay also seems to suffer from being in its predecessor's shadow. Tears has a lot of similarities to Breath of the Wild. For example, starting the game in an area where you can't leave and a ghost man helps you get some new abilities. Following the main quest by traveling to the land's 4 major races. teaming up with a young hero, fighting some force that threatens their town, navigating a dungeon-esque structure where you activate terminals, collecting Koroks, finding, entering, and completing shrines, retrieving memories from locations across Hyrule, watching the memories in a random order, unlocking towers, awakening great fairies, upgrading armor with your materials, saving up stronger and stronger weapons throughout the course of the game, finishing and recovering the Master Sword from a magical being that is gatekept by a player stat, fighting the final battle with Ganon at the castle, and a last phase of the fight that is more spectacle than challenge. Some of these are good repeats. Some of them are not. Yet the amount of similarity is striking. This indicates to me an inability to find a fitting and separate identity for Tears of the Kingdom. If the overarching decisions for this game were made early, with the idea of a speedy sequel in mind, then they might have not given themselves enough time to find said identity. Also, given how rooted this game is in its predecessor, they might have found themselves trapped in what worked well before. In my opinion, the more something stays the same, the more you have to change. It seems they are unable or unwilling to break away from the ideas of Breath of the Wild when it came to structure. The story also had some issues. Now, the moment with Zelda's transformation was great, very impactful and compelling. The dragon fight at the end was thrilling too. The atmosphere was good. The gist of the story was even pretty good. However, the sentence-to-sentence quality of writing was very mediocre, and the story structure was quite lacking. I'm not even referring to the randomized order that most people watch the cutscenes in. There's this feeling I can't shake. Everything felt like an outline. Everything felt like it was only there for the sake of the audience and the drama. Everything felt like a plot point. It didn't feel like a well-embodied and fleshed-out world. To me, that sounds like the result of decisions being made too early. It sounds like a story that wasn't given time to grow, change, or self-correct before being set in stone. Then again, this could be the result of sticking so close to the structure and design priorities of Breath of the Wild. Unfortunately, the story in Tears of the Kingdom required a much higher level of care and attention than did Breath of the Wild's. It did not get that. It wasn't outright bad, but as a whole, it wasn't good either. A lot of this disappointment is about player expectations, and it would be unfair to judge the game on that alone. I know I have my own opinions and preferences. Some of my thoughts are going to simply be incompatible with what others enjoy. Yet it's not just me. Yes, player expectations can color a game experience, but a well-designed game sets its own expectations and meets them. That's a very hard challenge, so I'm not here to belittle anyone, but this is exactly what I'm here to discuss. I don't think Tears of the Kingdom structured itself well, nor gave a clear and accurate impression of what to expect. It grew in playtime to be quite long, covering a vast expanse of land. Then with greater time investment comes a need for more unique experiences. I think this is where the game went wrong. Instead of designing from the start a game with a shorter playtime, thus sticking closer to the original scope of their ideas, they let it expand out. It took on a bloated feeling for me. The game uncomfortably straddles this line between a trim DLC structure and a large, brand new experience. I think the developers had to trudge through that very confusion along the way, and they never really settled the issue. The Depths exemplifies this contrast between a large scope and a lack of unique content to fill it. It becomes a time waster, and not the fun time waster that games are meant to be. It becomes repetitive, and the game even loses its sense of adventure and progression for a time. I believe all this stems from a dissonance between the initial conception and the time invested, both by the player and throughout development. There was a choice to be made. Either a slick and trim DLC with great new mechanics, but a smaller scope, or a whole new game designed to get the best out of their new mechanics. I think they ended up not doing either and paying a cost for it. The game can function very well as a sandbox for building stuff, unoffensive busy work, and an opportunity to chill in some fantastic vibe. Yet it did not craft an elegant experience, one that prioritized efficiency, novelty, and impact. So what should they have done differently? There are plenty of people who are wholeheartedly enjoying Tears of the Kingdom, so maybe the developers shouldn't have done anything different. Maybe it works for those people, and not me, and that's okay. If what I've discussed is of concern, then maybe they should have set themselves smaller goals and let the players progress more quickly. However, the biggest takeaway for me is this central theme of expectations. Expectations, preconceptions, and intentions can drastically affect decisions you'll make down the line. I think it wise to be flexible when it comes to these things. If you are willing to consider alternatives and make big changes early on, then you save yourself so much time in the future. Possibilities are so endless. We try to collapse down the decisions that are available to us so immediately, just so we can cope. I understand this. It is necessary to trim the distractions and not delay on the threshold of every decision. Yet I believe in the idea of sketching things out very early while making final decisions very late. In this way, you give yourself time to discover problems and find the best solutions to benefit the entire project. I'm not sure how much of this applies to the Zelda team. I'm in the areas of pure pontification and speculation now. Still, there may be a kernel of truth here. And either way, these topics are worth exploring. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you would like to listen to more, there are extra episodes available via my Patreon. Link in the description.